What's up, listeners? Dave and Ben here.
Hey.
Before we get to this next episode, we are announcing the launch of our Patreon page, which is going to be patreon.com/consensusunreality, in which you'll be able to sign up for a couple different tiers of membership, and it's going to include some exclusive episodes every month, which is going to be something that we're going to start doing, especially with multi-part episodes.
Yep.
You'll also have access to an exclusive Q&A that we're going to try and do every month.
Kind of a live Q&A, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have a bunch of different other exclusive perks. A topic suggestion box if you choose the second tier.
Yeah, so maybe you can dictate what we do.
Yep, and exclusive interviews and first dibs on upcoming Consensus Unreality merchandise with a special discount too. So there's a bunch of perks in there. We're basically asking for this. The first tier starts at like $5 a month, which is the price of a latte. And we're asking for your support just to help us out with our, Audible accounts, books that we're purchasing, documentaries we're renting to compile all of this research for this insane stuff.
Right, just normal upkeep type cost. Going towards hosting type stuff, just like, the minimal costs that we put out to run this podcast. And, it's a way to join the metaphysical club that we are establishing.
Yeah. We're not on Brainiac level, but it also is, this does require a bit of work in like I mentioned before, compiling this stuff. So we do appreciate your support. We hope you can join us on that and get access to the exclusive content. Like the second part of this coming episode is going to be Patreon only, so those perks are going to start kicking in really soon.
Yeah, all the kind of dark material will probably be hidden in the Patreon. Yeah. But that's the stuff you want to hear. So, yeah, sign up if you want. We would really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, and here's the next episode.
The number 11, why is it called 11 and not 21, like 22, 33, 20, like 11, who thought of that? Don't like it. The ocean, how is it so deep? Why is it so deep? Don't get it. I just don't understand space. I just don't get it, what? It just confuses me. Name things, who looked at something and was like, that's the sky? What? Things I just don't understand.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 12 of Consensus Unreality, which is still a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Today we are diving deep into the hollow earth.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
It's the best kind of earth.
Yeah. This is kind of funny. We're doing a remote episode here, which is sort of a new venture, but we're going to go for it and keep it all safe.
Yep.
Against the
invisible
virus.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Right. The first Zoom Congress.
Yep. And I would say that so the premise of this episode was initially going to be concerning Antarctica and conspiracies involving Antarctica, specifically involving Admiral Byrd's missions. Well, I guess both poles. Yeah.
Yeah, he flew over the North Pole too, right?
First.
Well, that's a big part of, I guess, the episode too, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in preparation, I think we all gathered a bunch of different things for this one. One of which was a new-ish Linda Moulton Howell documentary.
How?
Yeah, Linda Moulton Howell. Linda Moulton Howell.
Yeah, she's a werewolf.
Yeah, Howell.
Yeah,
I'm still saying it. I'm just from New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that one.
Yeah. Which was getting into secret space program stuff in Antarctica. But
nice.
Yeah. So where do you guys want to start here?
Well, I read the book Arctos by Jocelyn Godwin, which is all about the polar myth, and so just occult and mythological and parapolitical happenings at both poles of the Earth. And I read a bit of Alone by Richard E. Byrd, the aforementioned adventurer, explorer, Mason.
Did you find any like crazy tidbits in there? Because that's not the diary. That's like the autobiography.
It's mostly from diaries. I guess. I mean, I've been looking into the missing diary of Admiral Byrd, and I think it's pretty much definitely not written by him because the writing style is so different. It's like really
seems
bad.
to be a fake. Yeah.
It wasn't published until like 96 or something, right?
Yeah, it was published in like the mid 90s. I would love to have a copy because it's kind of a fun hoax, but it's definitely not written by him, which is not to say that some of the claims in it about like his entering into the Hollow Earth aren't, true. They could be, but I think the diary is fake. Oh, we should add that we are joined again by Mike Bruno.
Yep. Thanks for coming on.
Hello.
Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me. In that questionable diary is where he supposedly claims that he was chased out by a bunch of UFOs, right?
Right, yeah. I love that. I mean, that could only have been written post Star Wars, though. That's like not like something a person from the 40s would say. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, are you guys aware that the conventional wisdom is that Byrd didn't actually reach the North Pole?
Yeah, he ran out of fuel.
Right. And there's, of course, like the legend is that either way, it's documented that he was basically having engine troubles and like hovering around for about 3 hours, which is unaccounted for. And that is when people plug in that he was drawn into this opening at the North Pole and encountered a lush green landscape, which is going to get into the Hollow Earth conspiracy stuff.
Yeah.
And then people will say he encountered beings. He saw all kinds of fauna and creatures and stuff.
Yeah, that's all from like the missing diary thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like folkloric,
Right, totally. And I love that. I mean, I think, and then there's like real conspiracy-ish connections with Byrd too, like the whole, what is that, Operation High Jump, like all of that. So I don't know if we can rule out that there's some kind of like hidden like adventures in the North Pole with him.
Either way, that's what's so interesting about this topic is that it's so secretive. And I don't know if you guys watched any of there was movies made about High Jump. Like there was a lot of film footage, and there's sort of like interviews that seem like mock meetings between Eisenhower and Byrd and his pilot. I forget his pilot's name now, who died after the first couple flights.
Yeah.
But it just seems like this old style like propaganda fabrication. But there's a hell of a lot else going on there. Like,
totally.
I guess we can talk initially about, if we're going to start with Byrd, we could talk a little bit about the funding and how the first pole polar flight came to be was funded by
Rockefeller, right?
John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah. And was Ford involved with the early stuff?
Ford gave the plane and funded it.
Right.
And there's going to be a lot of Nazi connections here because this story is not complete unless you get into the Nazi mythos of actually physically going to Antarctica, performing their own expeditions, purportedly creating naval bases there, and then how far you want to go down the rabbit hole, it goes into the whole Nazi UFO program.
Right. They had set up Neuschwabenland, right?
So that was the Nazis had their own Antarctic expedition, which was called Neuschwabenland, which was a reference to creating like a new land, like a new utopia for their rediscovering of the Aryan race or whatever.
Right.
Which has all these ties to mythology. And I think what we're going to do here, because in sort of researching for this topic, I think we all came to find that there's a lot more involved than just Antarctica.
Yep.
So we're going to get into the whole Nazi mythos and sort of contextualize what's going on there with that whole UFO folklore in episode 2 of what will be a multi-parter.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Does that mean we're not going to talk about the Vril Society and Fool Society?
We're gonna mention them here in this episode, but I think we're gonna really go deep into that stuff next episode, because I think we kind of realize that whole topic is going to deserve like its own whole more than an hour, because there's so much there, and the funding, and then the sort of I have to stop saying sort of. That's what I realized in making a podcast. But all of the assets being moved around after the fall of the Third Reich, and then there's the whole supposed quote unquote Fourth Reich stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess
stuff.
we should get it.
Largely, and that's in Antarctica, largely, right? The Fourth Reich.
And here at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. That too.
That all depends how you're looking at it, my friend.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, we'll have to get into the Nazi stuff.
But I think
a little bit. but not too much today.
Today, yeah, we should talk first a little bit about what is the Hollow Earth theory. Where does that come from, and what kind of mythos did that create? Because it had a pretty strong scientific ramifications in its time.
Yeah.
I mean, the progenitor of this theory comes from Halley, who's known for Halley's Comet.
Yeah. And then it was picked up by, what is that, Sim? How do you say his name?
Sims, yeah.
It was kind of popularized by Edward Bulwer-Lytton, right? And the Vril and the coming.
Right. That's definitely where the Vril stuff came from. There's no like earlier mention of it, unless you like want to translate it to like chi or like some other kind of like force of energy. But yeah, Bulwer-Lytton was the first. But I think the Hollow Earth stuff may have predated that slightly.
Oh no, no, it's predated by a while because Halley's in the 1600s.
He's in this? Yeah, and he was like, was he the the concentric orbs kind of person? Yeah.
So his theory was essentially that the Earth was like a series of rotating disc kind of plates. And this is like, it all sounds like pseudoscience now, but at the time, Halley obviously discovered the trajectory of the Halley's Comet, and he basically published Newton's first works, And so this was kind of like the hollow earth theory was a big thing in its time. And I think then you also have all this different mythology. So you have the Agartha legend, you have Valhalla, you have Shambhala, and there's there and even like so this the Hopi supposedly have a mythos of people coming out of the earth.
Right. It's also maybe important to distinguish between like cavern lore and like underworld lore and like actual like although I think they're related.
Yeah.
And I think
Like-
if we get into like the Richard Shaver mythos, that has a lot to do with like Hollow Earth, but also kind of like hell, right? Like underworld stuff.
Dante's Inferno.
Right, of course.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Going into the earth. And I think, to me, scientifically, the hollow earth thing is interesting because, you know, some of it sounds ridiculous that the earth is actually just, like, if you think about it on a base level, the earth is hollow. It kind of sounds preposterous to what we know about the mantle down to the core of the earth at this point. But then you have a discovery like in 2014, scientists say that they discovered that there's a deposit of water about 400 feet below the earth, or 4,000 rather, that it contains an amount of water that is 3 times the size of all of our oceans combined.
Right. I learned about that today too.
Yeah. And under the ice deposits in Antarctica, there's, you know, massive caverns where the temperature is a lot warmer than it is above the ice, obviously. And below that, you have to imagine there's all sorts of like thermal caverns and stuff with different temperatures.
Right.
And so you have to wonder, is like Bird making a claim that he flew over and saw a massive crater going below the ice, and he said, quote unquote, a Greenland beyond the ice. We don't know if this is actually attributed to him or not.
Right.
But can that be scientifically plausible, knowing what we know now? And then is it logistically plausible that the Nazis, which we'll talk about later, is it logistically plausible that they were able to industrially create massive military bases in Antarctica in that time frame?
Yeah. Like,
Well, they're able to create military bases underneath all sorts of places, right?
Yep.
Like all of our military bases that are in question in the U.S. are underground, right?
Yeah. And
Right.
the Nazis had like the most sophisticated navy at the time. They were able to mobilize industry in Spain and in Holland using all of their ports. They were able to create like a ferocious naval presence from like 26 to 38 or whatever in that time frame. Basically control any ocean they wanted, you know. So is there the potential that they were able to mobilize this sort of like industrial effort at the pole? I think so.
Yeah. I guess it depends how large of a task that is compared to constructing a base under your own country, like in these extreme conditions. I'm sure it's possible, but
well, I guess
I don't know. Yeah, they'd have to have a great reason for it, and I'm not sure if like the mythology of like the polar origin of the Aryans is. I mean, I guess like what do you call it? The strategic purpose of Antarctic bases.
I think there is a great strategic purpose of it. You have a trajectory to any direction on Earth from that point.
Yeah.
And I think that this is substantiated by high jump. I think it was recognized by FDR that the Nazis making an effort to go there, to explore and bring, you know, a naval presence there was a threat. And I think that's why Byrd was sent there the second time for Operation High Jump with our own sort of naval presence and a representation of naval planes too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
They had also gone there to set up weather collection sites as well.
Right. Yeah. What is that Little America? The U.S.
that was, I guess,
there.
our first base that we had set up.
Yeah. What was the purpose of that? Like just for exploration, or was that a wartime base? I can't remember.
I think it was, I mean, I guess we should get into who was Admiral Byrd too, and there's all these strange connections because Byrd was a 33rd degree Mason.
Hell yeah.
I mean, one of the first things they did when they got there in high jump, I believe, was put Masonic flags
and a fez.
Right, they set up lodge number 777.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken.
Love that. I mean, yeah, people love the numbers shit.
Yeah.
And then sorry, I blanked there. Got light troubles. Little America, there was not only the first one, but I think it went up to Little America 5, which was Operation High Jump, was the 5th Little America that was set up.
Yeah, it's all these Little Americas running around.
I guess they just started disappearing or something as the ice shifted, and they just had to keep remaking Little America.
Yeah. I guess that's actually, I mean, because today we're seeing all this, climate change stuff, and so the whole Antarctic, like hidden ancient civilizations, is kind of coming back into the popular consciousness.
There's all kinds of
all
talk.
The ice will melt and Atlantis will rise out of it.
Right. And that's going to be the premise for the third part of this series.
You think so? This is all on the fly.
I think no, it's not even, because it got me thinking. And it's like you have to create a premise for the whole antediluvian story, because that's
true.
Wrapped up in Antarctica too.
Right. Yeah, and the Arctic as well. A lot of people, like the Hyperborean stuff, people like kind of equated that with Atlantis at certain times, and not as well,
To go back to Leighton's real story, the people there who lived underground were remnants of Atlantis. That's what they claim in the book.
Right.
The angelic alien dwellers of.
And he was kind of like Bulwer Lytton was obviously pre World War II.
So I think it was published in 1871.
Right. So he wasn't like a fascist in that sense, but he was like kind of an aristocratic figure who like wrote this allegorical tale about like a hidden elite coming back to sort of set the world straight with their power. Is interesting.
Right.
And he was he may have been a Rosicrucian, but he like wrote Zanoni, a Rosicrucian tale.
Yeah, and, I actually really like that book.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was excellent. And the Theosophists love the real story. They I bet they do.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I guess maybe we'll talk about this more in the episode focusing on the whole Nazi occult thing. But the occult esoteric aspect of Nazism did come out of the same sort of soil as Theosophy, and obviously grew into I mean, Hitler himself, I don't think was that much of an occultist. I mean, people will argue about that, but I think he had like an interest in the power of its symbology, as opposed to like being a student of it the way like maybe Hess was, or like
Hess, or Himmler,
who were like actual, I think, devotees of this like Germanic paganism / like Ariosophy, I guess they called it, right? The Guido von List, who sort of perverted Theosophy into like a racial spirituality. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder how much the Vril concept is influenced by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly's Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, which I think only
when did that come out?
I'm going to say like 1860 something.
So that was in the air. And there were people in the early 19th century writing about like man's origin, like in a polar like supercontinent that has since disappeared. Like there's a big thing in the air at the time of people wanting to find an alternative to the Judeo-Christian origin of humanity. So they were kind of, coming up with all these alternative, like the people didn't want humanity to have started in like the Euphrates Valley or whatever.
Yeah.
So they were looking for origins in Asia. They were looking for origins in India, and that tied in with all the Indo-Aryan theories that sort of gave rise to Nazism. It's really fascinating how these kind of like speculative pseudoscientific trains of thought end up in these like weird, like kind of like miles away political projects like 100 years later.
Yeah. It's weird. Atlantis, the Antediluvian World is 1882 and Vril is 1871.
Yeah.
But I would have to imagine that Donnelly's work was probably permeating a little bit before it got published.
I think that there were other Atlantis books too, especially in France and stuff like that. I think a lot of people were talking about this. Like I think Bulwer Lytton was kind of like, yeah, in the same like class of thinkers as Donnelly, and like during the same era. I mean, probably like similar reading, like reading similar books.
Yeah,
he's famous for the phrase "the pen is mightier than the sword."
Right. And then, of course, you have the 1531 Orontes Phineas had a map that depicted Antarctica without ice on it. And it's basically the exact shape of the continent. And it's placed
the Piri Reis map?
That's a different map. The Phineas one is even more accurate from 1531.
This is a map podcast now.
and the idea is that these maps were usually copied from earlier maps.
Right.
But Antarctica wasn't supposed to have been mapped out at all for like 300 years later, I don't think.
Yeah. People like attribute that to what, like Viking explorers and like, or like, I guess, who would that be? I guess like
Vikings would make sense.
Latin American explorers, I guess. I mean, who would be going to Antarctica that long ago? Pretty far for like Norwegian or like Northern European people.
The first time it was acknowledged by the Western world was in 1773.
That's so funny. That's after our country was founded.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No, wait, right before. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get it was obviously known of.
Right, sure.
But
it takes people forever to like acknowledge things like officially.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm reading this Arctos book by Jocelyn Godwin, subtitled "The Polar Myth in Science, Symbolism, and Nazi Survival." So, but the whole first part of this book is mostly about like people like Plato and other ancient philosophers having this idea that there used to be like inhabitants of the poles, sort of, and that the Earth used to be in a golden time, like a golden age,
yeah.
The there's no tilt to the Earth, so like everything was even about the cycles of the years and the days, and it was like this time of like, these crazy like animals could live at the polar regions because there was no like seasons in the way we had them now. It's just kind of like this. I think it was one of those sort of like thought experiments that those ancient philosophers would do.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people later took that and ran with it, especially when we get like towards theosophical times, like towards that kind of project of like thinking about the world in terms of like the Indian like yugas or whatever, those cycles.
Well, you also have Charles Hapgood's theory.
What did he say? Well,
Hapgood is known for the polar shifts.
Oh yeah.
And if within his theory of crustal displacement, that around the time of the first ice age, there was a catastrophic event which displaced the some of the tectonic plates. But previous to that, it's the idea that Antarctica could have been inhabited and wasn't covered by ice, and then there was something to displace the plate. And then that's also kind of theories about like the magnetic north and stuff like that.
Right, how that'll flip and stuff, or like, and that causes catastrophe.
Mm-hmm. But then, I mean, not to completely divulge the Atlantis antediluvian world like theory, because I don't think we want to go completely down that right now, and I don't even think we're totally prepared to. But at the same time, so there's this idea that around roughly like 12,000 BC to 10,500 that there could have been a sort of advanced society that was destroyed in some sort of catastrophe. And this is where a lot of the flood myths come from, and this is where the Atlantis myth comes from. But the funny thing is that a lot of the stone monuments and structures around the world, the dates keep getting pushed back to around this time. So it does kind of lend itself to some sort of a lot more connectivity than had previously been thought.
Totally. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. That's like, and that's something I kind of have been like keeping track of over the years. Like, especially I feel like in the last 10 years or so, just like the theory of, human travel, like ancient humans, like migration, and like maybe like, especially when people first ended up in America, they keep changing it. Or there's a lot of like controversy where you'd think it would be something that's like relatively possible to understand.
It's crazy. I mean, even I think I might have mentioned this in a previous episode somehow. I have no idea how, but in school we're taught that people came to America over the Bering Strait, and this is called the Clovis First theory. But I think
that was that in the Q episode for some reason?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But now we know that that's not true. There's a lot of earlier sites closer to the East Coast, so people probably migrated up the Mississippi or something like that. But I mean, we don't have a history for this, probably because we ignored so much native mythos and lore to begin with. But it's really interesting because I think this idea of an antediluvian world gets tossed out as being ridiculous, and then these sites, the dates keep getting older and older as we learn more.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting anecdote about the Bering Strait is that the last Civil War battle happened in the Bering Strait, and it was a naval battle where the Confederate ship Shenandoah was still active after the Civil War was technically over.
Whoa.
Damn.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wait, where is that?
It's like Alaska. It's where like crabbing and whaling happens. I think the ship was really, I don't want to go too far off topic, but I think the ship was basically trying to like mess up trading for Union ships.
Wow.
So they were going after whaling ships.
That's crazy. So what? Maybe we should get back to Admiral Byrd a little bit. He's kind of the focus of this episode, I guess, and his links to high jump, and then also his links to the contemporary Hollow Earth theory. I watched a short documentary, and I think Dave, did you watch that too?
Yeah, I caught that today. Yeah.
About this, I guess it was about the preparation of this like little Hollow Earth Society. It was, what was it, like the International Society for a Complete Earth, I think.
International Society for a Complete Earth. I love that name.
It was a really quaint, really charming documentary, I thought, actually. But it was about them preparing to try to recreate birds pass over the North Pole. I don't know. I think it was probably from like the 80s or 90s, that documentary. So I wonder if they ever did it. I didn't follow up.
When's the last time somebody has flown over the North Pole?
Maybe it was them. I don't know. I actually don't know. Which is something we should have looked up, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably last Christmas.
Yeah.
That's good.
I can't believe we didn't do any Santa research. That's like a basic part of polar mythos.
True.
And it's almost seasonal at this point.
That's true.
Yeah, and it involves elves.
Yeah, wow, we really fucked up. We could have, Saint Nicholas.
It's part 4.
Right, that'll be part 4 for Christmas. Elves and his hallucinogenic mushroom outfit, or whatever people say. Like, he's supposed to be like the fly Alaric or whatever, because of the red and the white.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people fly over it now, but there's a lot of risks because there's not really anywhere to land and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why he turned back or whatever. He ran out of fuel.
Or he went down into the caverns.
Or right, yeah. The dinos took him in and taught him some dino facts.
Well, the North Pole is really just like there's no land supposedly. It's just frozen at certain points of the year, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the South Pole has Antarctica, which is more than one landmass covered in it.
Right. It's the Arctic Sea up there, I guess, right? And the Arctic Ocean. And there's Greenland. Is Greenland like, that's land, right? That's land under there.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a ways though.
Yeah, but that's part of Greenland. Is part of the North Pole as such, right?
I don't think so, man. I think the Arctic ice sheet is an island on its own.
Huh.
I mean, we're just gonna make ourselves sound fucking stupid as hell.
No, I know basic geography.
I know shit.
I have no idea, actually. I know that it's up there, though, and like parts of like way northern Canada are parts of the Arctic, like
well,
ecology,
the Arctic,
right?
You're talking about the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
I'm
not talking about like the North Pole itself, which I guess that's not ocean, is it? It's just an ice sheet.
Yeah, it's just an ice sheet.
Yeah.
I think it melts seasonally,
right?
Or something.
Maybe that would be. I mean.
So I think it'd be hard for there to be like an entrance into Hollow Earth unless you went under the water in the North Pole.
That's true.
So that goes back to Sim's theory that at the North Pole and the South Pole, there's two holes that go into the center of the Earth.
Right, and one's positive and one's negative.
Right, and the Earth is kind of shaped like a donut, and you'll see this great and when Sims made this theory, there was a ton of ridicule. Like, even the newspapers of the day thought it was like the ramblings of a madman. It was kind of ridiculous. But then there was some substantiation from other like politicians and stuff.
Right. They wanted to investigate, right?
Yeah.
The holes at the poles.
Holes at the poles.
What else? So I guess we had Bird's sort of Rockefeller Ford funded northern journeys, and then we had his naval-funded, most famous one at the South Pole or the Antarctic.
Yeah, and and it's
high jump.
And John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil. Standard Oil gets into providing a lot of the oil for the Third Reich. And then you have Henry Ford, who has published his own newspaper newspaper articles and stuff that were anti-Semitic. I guess he's involved in the protocols.
He republished the protocols of he is the personal enemy of the podcast.
Yeah. And Ford was like Hitler. Ford was Hitler's hero. He apparently had like a life-size portrait of Henry Ford. Said this is like the epitome of, the whatever, standing up to this like Semitic thing or whatever. So Ford funds Admiral Byrd's mission, which is kind of curious, because there's this dual interest in going to the poles. And you have to assume that Ford was privy of the Nazi interest in it.
Totally.
Stuff.
I think he was, he was definitely pretty well in contact with Nazi people, right?
He was given that honor, I think, but that was a little bit later in like 1938 or something probably. But he was given the highest honor of a non-German citizen.
Right. So, I imagine he had friends that were Nazis.
There's that whole aspect of the funding and the dark money, and we're going to get into the Dulles brothers and probably get our computers turned off and stuff.
Right. The Fourth Reich within the CIA.
Yeah. That stuff comes beyond the paywall, beyond the paywall of ICE.
Yeah.
We got a sneezing cat in there?
Yes. This is funny because we have video and the listeners do not.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? I had something else to say about Birdman.
We're talking about.
I don't know what. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I missed anything while I let the cat out, but didn't the Nazis know that Bird was there during Operation High Jump and reach out to him?
They reached out to him for the New Schwabenland expedition, and apparently he went to Germany, and they were trying to get him to lead it because they knew he had been there, but that was before High Jump.
That was before High Jump.
Yeah,
okay.
they do Neuschwabenland. He declines, and then High Jump seems like it was a response to the Neuschwabenland expedition, which in itself is completely weird. Though it's like you mentioned before, Ben, if Germany is involved in a multi-front warfare in Europe, and they just send a pretty large expedition of a lot of
and engineers and some of they would need some of their best people because that's no mean feat to even have a base of operations out there,
right,
a pretty basic thing. I mean, it's definitely possible, but
you need massive ships to just break through the ice,
Right. You need and then all that stuff about I watched the Secret Land documentary or whatever that it was contemporary with I think was it Operation High Jump or one of those expeditions.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to plow and use dynamite to get even a mile. It took days. So it's just it's a huge feat.
Massive undertaking in the midst of a world war, a multi-front world war. It's really crazy to think about. So, I mean, no matter if you think there's a reptilian presence under the hollow earth or it's just some dark military thing that was happening, there is something to it. There was a lot going on. And I think we could get into some other stuff later too. But there's many countries have detonated nukes in Antarctica at this point.
Right.
There's been a lot of nuclear testing and ionospheric research stuff.
Yeah, that stuff's creepy.
Yep.
Because they're doing it to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Which is it's that's everybody.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, we went back in 1952, and I think I'm not sure if Bird went, but Bird might have gotten ill from like carbon monoxide, like out of a stove or something.
Oh, right. That's in the book alone. That's like his solo time. I forget where. Just like he's just like out somewhere, like pretty far even from Little America, just like at like a solo place, and yeah, the gas stove starts leaking, and he starts he like has like a psychotic episode,
right?
And is alone, and that's where that like famous passage of him seeing like a star that's too bright that he feels like is communicating with him.
Yeah,
and so that's where like the UFO myth kind of comes into it.
Well, the quotes from that are really crazy. Like he says that he's being beckoned by this star that is changing from, a blaring red orange to a silver disc, and it like phases in and out, and he feels like it's beckoning him.
Right. It's really beautiful and like terrifying. I'm not sure. I mean, the conventional wisdom on that is that he was very ill from being poisoned by, I'm not sure if it was carbon monoxide or just like gas from his heat there.
Is it at that point when he sees that image?
It's within like because that was happening for like I think a while. It's like within that time frame of when he's sort of, and he's like been alone. He's like alone for like a year or something like that, like with no one, like for hundreds of miles. It's kind of like he was under a lot of pressure, but that doesn't mean he didn't see some kind of crazy like UFO. I'm not the kind of person who's going to be like he definitely didn't.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think during Deep Freeze, which was like when they went back in the early 50s, they detonated 3 low-yield nukes. And, like, what's that? You're the first thing you do when you get there after World War II is quote, nuclear testing? Like,
right. They were really, like, well, they were doing that everywhere after World War II.
Yeah.
They were like, I mean, we're going to get into all kinds of, like, parapolitical weirdness if we start talking about that, which maybe we'll save or not,
Yeah.
But yeah, nukes everywhere, nukes in Nevada, nukes in the islands, just to see what would happen, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these expeditions are just fronts for testing and, other nefarious purposes.
Right.
Yeah. I think, most things are like that in military work. There's usually like several reasons for any one action.
Yeah. And so when the Germans go back, when the Germans go for Neuschwabenland, and like I mentioned, we'll talk about the mythology behind that in the following episode, but from, a military standpoint, they apparently set up a base there, which was called Station 211, and one of their lead admirals, Karl Dönitz, had famously said that they built a Shangri-La, an impregnable fortress, and a true paradise on Earth. So this is where that inkling of a massive military base being constructed, and sort of like also creating basically an auxiliary habitat for the Third Reich, leaving Germany and creating this stronghold in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. I mean, yeah, and the reason for, I mean, like you said before, there's definite strategic advantages to both Arctic and Antarctic military bases. Just like people are very seriously thinking about moon bases right now, like, or low Earth orbit like stuff, like weird like spy set, like there's strategic reasons for anything like that. But
you have
a lot of the,
like, imagine how well you'd be able to hide everything under the massive ice caverns too,
Totally. But I do think that there's reason to believe that there is like mythological, or like at least like mythic, like psychological reasons for, especially with all that like the German race, which they were trying to like really hype up at the time, even though it kind of sucks. All that about them being like descendants of this like subset of like Indo-Aryan, like who originally came from either Atlantis or like this Hyperborean continent. All this like racial mythology, which I don't think it was like a driving force behind World War II or anything like that, but I think that it was like in the air so much that like it could have like swayed people to want to do these like Antarctic expeditions, especially in Germany.
No, I think it did. I think that reasoning is massively intertwined with the Third Reich. I actually do think that the mythic implications were as strong as anything for them, because that was all that it relied on, was this pseudo mythology, to the point where you have there's a lot of fake documents. Obviously, you mentioned the protocols, but then there's also that document that they had, which was like a Roman historian writing about the Telluric, the Telluric Knights and stuff.
Yeah,
but that was actually like a fake
Teutonic.
Teutonic Telluric currents.
Yeah, well,
the Teutonic Knights. Yeah. But that was actually a forgery. But that was to the point where like this guy was held up in Italy, and Italy being Germany's allies at the time, Himmler actually shows up to this guy's place because he has the original document, and they're trying to get it from him, and he's like barging himself in his like villa. But yeah, once the original document was made public and available, it was like completely different, and it actually like was saying that the Germans were like a drunk and like frivolous like army and stuff like that.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. I love it. Like they're big bumbling, like they're all too big, but
it's just an example of how important this mythology and folklore was to the Third Reich.
It's totally important, I think, for them. Like they used it to mobilize, all those people. But I don't know if it was like on the minds. Like I don't think that's why any of the really top like Germany people. I mean, I think it was a pretty more like bald approach to like seeking power, and just like I don't know how. I know that they kind of talk about it, but I have a hard time buying that like they had this like mystical philosophy. I think it was it was useful, and a lot of them believed it, especially like the people who were in the Tula Society and like all that bull. But
apparently in one of the documentaries I watched, in Hitler's second book, he like has a dedication to like the head of the Tula Society.
When was that? Yeah, because I know he had a break with them, like before the war. He was kind of purging secret societies in general that weren't the SS, or like certain other like actual Nazi things. He was super influenced by people who were in that society like before the war. Yeah. So it's part of it, but
I also imagine like he just grew insane and extremely paranoid, and probably turned on everyone around him. But the mobilizing effort to begin with, like that was everything.
Totally.
That society and the apparent Vril Society too.
I mean, yeah, I'm still skeptical. I'm still skeptical about the Vril Society existing in like a really big way.
Right.
I think it's mostly like a post-war fabrication based on Leighton's novel.
But Maria Orsic is like a real person.
Totally.
Yeah.
I just don't know like if they had any, like they may have been like a seance circle or something, you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know if they were like a society in the way that like some of the other occult Nazi societies actually existed.
Well, that's one of the things I find super interesting about this is there's a whole alternative history about a Nazi propulsion and like UFO field that we have no idea if it's true or not, but there's the Foo Fighters, there's the Nazi bell.
Right. Der Glocke.
Yeah.
Which is fun to say.
Which comes from this Vril society that we're talking about, where apparently this channeler, Maria Orsic, had been in contact with extraterrestrial intelligences and then channels the technical specifications for harvesting this like anti-gravitic technology and all this stuff. But
is there like firsthand documents of her like channeling stuff?
I don't really know, and that's I think that's why we're putting this off so we can dive really deep into it. But I think either way, the fact that the whole Nazi UFO thing is such a large folklore within the UFO community.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting either way. Like, where does that come from if it isn't substantiated at all through real documents, then where does it come from, you know?
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, there are like theories like on both ends about where it could come from, like it being a real thing or it being a fabrication. And yeah, maybe we should just save that until there's more information at hand.
There's a lot to be said about that, and I think it's important to give it due diligence, and we'll do a lot of research on it, because I kind of only it was something that we obviously knew a bit about before, but you need a refresher, and I only kind of cracked the egg on it this week because I kind of forgot how important that is to the Antarctica story.
Yeah, totally.
Because you think you can talk about Hollow Earth in Antarctica, and then it's like, oh, Nazi, you know.
Right. Russia
opens up so many doors. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to just like have a goddamn Nazi episode.
Right.
But whatever, I guess that's a rite of passage for such a podcast as this.
Right. Well, that's why it's going to be beyond the paywall. If you want to hear us talk about Nazis.
Right. Beyond the paywall. That's a pretty good pun.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So how about Hollow Earth? We have Mr. Bird, another big Hollow Earth guy is Shaver, who we mentioned briefly.
Right.
Maybe he should. I personally think he deserves like a whole episode, just because he's he's a great example of a probable like hoaxer and the kind that we would talk about earlier in the show. But I mean, his stories are classic Hollow Earth stories, like weird advanced mutant races living in giant caverns under the earth.
Mm-hmm. And that comes from what was he out in Mount Shasta and stuff? Maybe. I know he definitely said a few of his stories there. I forget where he was from. He was collecting those like weird rocks that he would then like turn into like rock art, where he would like get his stories. Do you remember that? Like that was like a big part of his latter career, was like trying to convince people that like rocks that he found were actually like deteriorated glyphs telling of like ancient wars in like the Hollow Earth, which is very, he's like an outsider artist type dude.
Mount Shasta, similar to like the Tibetan mountains, is where theosophists believe that these adepts live within the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the Shambhala mythos is a big part of the Hollow Earth stuff, and that's kind of where the Nazis and the Vril adopted a lot of that from, because they took a lot of influence from Tibet.
And Agartha and all that stuff.
Yeah, and obviously the Aryan myth comes out of Sanskrit and stuff, right? It's a linguistic. People
trying desperately to find an alternate, because people assume that Hebrew was like the root language of.
Yeah, it's a language group, right? Yeah, that's
Right.
all it
And
is.
so they found Sanskrit and were like, this means that we're not the same type of people as Jews and like, Semitic races or whatever.
Right.
So they like kind of went buck wild with once they found that out. And yeah, but I was always kind of struggling to understand why, like, especially in like esoteric neo-Nazism that you like see today, why they're so obsessed with like Indian gods and like yoga and like tantra and like stuff like that.
Yoga Nazis?
And yeah, it's just yoga. It's because of this like 200-year-old link between what they thought of as like their own distinct race, the Aryans, and like how they split off from like the people who would become the inhabitants of India.
Yeah,
and it's just so fascinating that like there's like that there's this sympathy between, even during the war, between the Nazis and certain like fascist strains of Indian politics.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about that in our episode, "The Secret Destiny of America." So if you didn't listen to that one, go back. I think we talked a little bit about the Aryan pseudo history and stuff.
Yeah. That's right. That was a pretty good episode.
Pat yourself on the back there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should also talk a little bit about the weirder parts of, I guess it's ufology, but not really, like the whole alien races living inside of the earth, coming out of the hollow earth mythos. There's the idea that like reptilians are this inner earth species, and you'll see this in some sort of like conspiracy circles and stuff. The
right.
Draconians, and then there's
David
also
Icke,
David Icke. But then there's also like the Nordics, which ties back to the Space Brothers of Adamski and Howard Menger, which we mentioned in a previous episode.
Right.
They're also supposedly related to underground bases in Antarctica, but also in like Nevada.
Yeah.
Like that.
The Nordic type aliens, which always sat really like poorly with me, and like other people kind of took it like in the UFO community, which I think used to be a bit more naive, at least, I don't know, than it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of were just like, that's just what they look like, dude. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you sure it doesn't mean anything that like they're blonde-haired, blue-eyed aliens that are like super advanced? You don't think that has any parallels to like Nazi fantasies? Like,
right.
Today it seems so obvious that was just like, I don't know, some kind of something.
You think Howard Menger was just looking for love out there?
I mean, I don't even know. He very like, and then there's like, the Nazi UFO theory that like the reason these like early contactees were seeing people was because that they were just like people, like they were like Nazi survivors who like right before the war ended like had the technology to like go to like some secret base, and they would come down and pretend to be aliens, like all this crazy stuff.
Right.
Which I guess, like, if you're like a hardline skeptic, which I'm not, you'd be like, well, that's more likely than that they're aliens that just happen to look like people.
I don't think that you have to be a hardline skeptic for that per se. I just think like that is more plausible. That
right. It is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, also like thinking about the development of exotic technology and the secrecy surrounding exotic technologies. Like especially in aerospace, we don't learn about aerospace technology till like decades after it's created and utilized. And at this point, we probably don't know a ton about what's going on up there because everything's so shifty.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and all this stuff, I mean, looking into this topic turns you into kind of like an everything is an op kind of person, as I've demonstrated today. Like, because everything looks like it's some kind of like psyop or like some kind of like cover up for some kind of technology. Like anything to do with UFOs or like it all looked like, at least in this like subculture of the UFO field,
Yeah.
it all looks like, yeah, like trickery and like cover-ups.
Yeah.
It's really easy to fall into that mindset in general, you know?
Yeah, right.
Just whatever you're looking at. It's like, how do you trust it?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to look for anything solid because you have, like you mentioned, the intentional masking and cover-ups by intelligence or by the departments of defense from each nation. And then you also have all these, strange people who are involved. And then things are also spread out over a continent, spread out into space. So it just gets blurry.
Right.
It's hard to look for clear lineages, but we're doing the best we can here.
Totally.
I think it's interesting to me how these pseudo-historical lineages get mapped out and become new mythologies,
Yeah. And I think we're seeing one of those develop right now. You're listening to that Michael Salas book, right?
Mm-hmm.
The audiobook. I think we're seeing a mythology. I mean, being created with the whole like Corey Good thing, and like the exopolitics thing has kind of like developed its own dogma. Which isn't to say that book isn't useful in gathering like all this disparate stuff about like post World War II Nazi infiltration.
Yeah, the book that Ben is talking about is Antarctica's Hidden History, Corporate Foundations of Secret Space Programs by Dr. Michael Salla.
His wife is a associate of, what's that guy's name? The gazer. The dude who gazes.
Yeah, what is his name? Like Baco or something?
Bracho. Who's this like Croatian dude who's like
he's like really, stares. Yeah,
he's so goofy looking too.
Yeah, he's
and
cool.
People are just like
all these middle-aged women just weep when this dude like stares at it. He looks like a shittier Fabio. It's really cool.
Yeah, I really recommend looking up. Braco.
But yeah, I don't know. This book is kind of driving me insane. And this whole topic, it's like, all right, great. Now for the next fucking month, I have to allocate like a large portion of my brain to thinking about this like global, interdimensional conspiracy that I will never know if any of it is at all true, and I have to like interrogate it from these different angles. But and the book is kind of a microcosm of that, because this book has it compiles like a lot of really interesting information, especially about the corporate funding of the Third Reich, even before the fall and before the end of World War II, and a lot of the involvement of American corporations and multinational corporations, basically just because it was beneficial to them. And then there's also before the fall, all of the assets were moved out of Nazi Germany, basically, guided by the Dulles Brothers law firm, which is Sullivan Cromwell. They were basically instructed on how to remove the assets and then put these assets in different countries. And it's like, is there an agenda here that is beneficial to the Third Reich, or is it just because it's benefiting these multinational corporate interests and American corporations by getting these assets bonded into their companies? So I think it's just that dense of a thing.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, I'm
reading Gravity's Rainbow right now, and which I guess I should have read a long time ago, but don't judge me, but and it's amazing. It's this great book, and so much of this like stuff that's coming up about Antarctica, which I thought was kind of a random, interesting, hollow earthy topic, but now it's like it's all like linking up like to this stuff I'm reading in Gravity's Rainbow about like rocket stuff and propulsion.
Right.
I think the American funding of of some of Nazi Germany at least, and not America, the government necessarily, but America, like Ford and corporatists. I think it's a good argument for like this really annoying myth that there's like this German ingenuity that like just kind of like gave them this like overwhelming force. Whereas what they really had was like extreme funding from like all over the world. It's not because like Germans are like born with like this amazing, just like it's like.
Well, it would.
People always say that they're just like, yeah, there's that German stuff, and it's like, no, it's not. It's like Henry Ford's millions.
Yeah, like how would this country have logistically mobilized after being completely bankrupt at the end of World War One? Well, they did it.
Right.
They were enabled through essentially breaking away. And then getting funding from the United States and other countries. But like I said...
Not necessarily the U.S. as an entity.
Well, American corporations.
Right, yeah. But like, I think it's an important distinction.
Yeah. Okay.
At least it was back then. Maybe not today.
Right. It's kind of funny. Did you guys ever watch Lost?
Yeah, oh yeah.
No.
To me, it seems like Lost is just about the entire Antarctica conspiracy.
You think so? That deserves an episode or something.
No, I don't think so. Like, I don't think it deserves an episode.
Interpretation.
If people watch that show, they did. If they didn't, they don't know what I'm talking about. But like,
that's fair.
To me, it seems like the writers' room and J.J. Abrams were just like privy of Antarctica conspiracy theory stuff, and
I imagine they were.
Because you have all the different experimentation, you have like the scientific anomalies, you have underground bases, you have defunct underground bases. I don't know. I just thought that was something interesting to mention because after learning more about the Antarctica and the polar conspiracies,
right. I wonder if Lost deserves like a, you know how people obsessively look over like The Shining or like Twin Peaks for like, I wonder if it, because like I remember that scene with the giant feet. Do you remember that from the statue? Like an ancient statue in Lost, and then like they never
rings a bell.
Like they never like followed up on it. There's just like so much stuff that they like, which probably can be attributed to like overzealous creatives in the writers' room. But like you wonder if there's like some kind of like paranoid interpretation that would be fun.
I don't know. I think there's something there, but I wouldn't want to do a show. Like, I don't want to talk about
I don't want to rewatch
fiction.
Lost.
Like, I don't want to talk about actual fiction. I want to talk about things that could be fiction, but might not be.
What about fiction that could be true, but might not be?
Exactly, yeah. That's more
like,
our shtick. Yeah.
Like Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
But... yeah. And then, I mean, there's the whole Jules Verne, Edgar Allan Poe, Lovecraft, all these writers who used polar regions as like settings or themes for their, and, you know, Verne actually doing it, a Hollow Earth story, Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Well, it's interesting because there's that aspect of fiction, but then it's like we really do know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the seafloor. And we've only drilled like something like 4 miles into the crust of the Earth when it, you know, is like 400 miles deep. And then there's a whole layer of water. Like, you know, I'm not saying it's an easy task, but we don't really know a lot about the makeup of our planet.
I guess like, they started drilling, and then after about 4 miles, like they started hearing this like screaming. The Earth was just in pain from the thing. Just kidding. That's not true. And I made it up. But yeah, I mean, and maybe they have actually explored the Earth more than they want to. I mean, you never know with any of this stuff. But at least publicly, we don't know anything about the Earth. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that stuff too. I think in terms of the seafloor has probably been pretty mapped out through sonar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of the crust and the internal layers of the Earth, I don't think we've gone too deep at all.
What's that movie where they go into the core? Do you remember that? It was like some like
Journey to the Center of the Earth.
no, it's like they drill into the Earth's core. It's called like
Drill.
yeah, drill or like the core. It's like but for some reason I feel like The Rock is in it, but I don't think he is. But like someone who in my mind reminds me of The Rock.
The Rock is in the Journey to the Center of the Earth remake.
Okay, so that's probably where I'm getting the confusion. I don't know what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but anyway, there's all this fiction about trying to understand our core, or like that the fact that we don't understand it, and that like something else is happening there. So it's one of those things that keeps popping up. It's like an archetype, and it's always engaging. Like it's like it's endlessly. What's the word? It's like endlessly usable as material.
Yeah.
So I think that gives it like an archetypal character.
I think it's interesting how much of a military presence there's been in Antarctica since high jump and deep freeze, an international one. There's essentially that treaty, I think, that was shortly after World War II, where there was an international treaty not to conduct military testing in Antarctica, and like every country, every like major military presence, like basically broke that treaty.
Yeah, well, what else would they do? Yeah, I think it's every once in a while you read like a news story about some like new mission to the South Pole, or like you hear like a news story about like scientists, like something crazy happening with the scientists who like are isolated there, like you know, like chlamydia outbreak at the South Polar Research Station, you know, like I can't. There was even something recently about like coronavirus, and the way that the people in these like super isolated places are reacting to that. I think we lost Mike.
Yeah. Well, do you remember like
no,
the Lake Vostok stuff?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, where there was like a giant pond that was hidden under a huge layer of ice, and there's all these like prehistoric species in there and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So do you guys think? What do you guys think happened with Bird? Do you? I think it's interesting that the that high jump apparently was like mostly Masons. Did you guys hear that? Like
like mostly the crew.
Yeah, most of the crew was like Freemasons.
Yeah, the Freemason stuff is so interesting.
Yeah.
Another like thing, because like the Nazis hated them, but they're all over the halls of power of the U.S. and you wonder how much like all these like different weird power societies really do hate each other.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think in filming the expeditions and stuff, they try and make it seem like it's just a very normal American discovery or reconnaissance expedition. But then why is there this like esoteric society having such a strong presence in it, you know? Right.
And like naming it 777 or like putting their fez down with like the little Mason sign on it. Yeah, all this like, and that stuff's all over exploration and like military stuff. All this, I mean, as any conspiracy like novice will tell you, it's like all the code names and stuff, like you know, all that stuff
with NASA and stuff.
Right. Yeah, especially NASA.
I know.
It's the shroud of secrecy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is we're about to go down some like flat earther territory, but
yeah,
the
flat Earth is maybe as a counterpoint to the hollow Earth, because we were talking about the other day, like why the flat Earth is so like popular now, but the hollow Earth was so popular like 100 years ago.
I think the hollow Earth is like cooler.
It is.
We are the hollow men.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's also more reasonable.
Right.
That
Yeah.
they're, cave dwelling societies. Why not?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be literally true to be like within the realm of scientific possibility. Because I feel like when people critique it, they're like, well, based on gravity, the Earth would collapse if it was hollow. And it's like, you don't necessarily mean it's like hollow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right,
what I think is interesting about it. Like, there are these massive caverns. I mean, that's the whole Hellier and Pennyroyal thing, is that underneath Kentucky you can make your way through the Mammoth Cave from like stateside to stateside almost, which is insane, just right under Kentucky.
And who's to say that there aren't goblins running around there?
Totally. And there's a lot of people to say that there are.
Yeah. It's about to be a podcast about a TV show.
About a show. Yeah, about a state.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Like, the whole Hollow Earth thing does seem to have a very primordial connection with like inner Earth caverns, and then there's like it all goes back to like cave painting and stuff. Like the first time that man started to represent things was in caverns. For almost probably the first time we had a relationship with recorded language or written language was these shamans in these caves by torch lanterns, like putting handprints on walls and stuff. So there's just this connection to caves,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is. And there's, of course there's psychological things you could say about that, like the interest in caves as like a safe place.
Is it safe? I mean, the Hollow Earth to me like is shrouded in
the Hollow
mystery.
Earth is scary.
Yeah.
But I mean, like early man living in like, not like caves that lead into the earth, but like, like as like a place, like the first homes were like maybe caves, although,
Do you, isn't there, so with Bird, I know there's like a TV interview with him where he's being interviewed on a television show, and that's where he says something peculiar about wanting to go back to the Greenland beyond the ice.
Yeah. I mean, what if he's just talking about like Greenland, the place?
No, I don't. I mean, it's not framed like that.
No, I know it's not, but that would be the go-to explanation, I think, for people trying to explain it away. I mean, yeah, that's a really cryptic thing to say, isn't it?
He's talking about like a lush portion of the pole.
Yeah. Right. There's some place within Antarctica that is like not covered in ice. That's like pretty known.
Right.
Maybe it's that.
Yeah, I hope.
Well, I think
he was being serious.
I think he might have said this. I guess about the solo flight, maybe in Antarctica. It was that one, but I mean, then you also have like people talking about woolly mammoths being found and being dissected, and they find vegetation that isn't proportionate to a land covered in ice.
They find them in Antarctica, or where like they find them in polar regions.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean that goes back to all that ancient folklore and philosophy about like a golden age or whatever.
Yeah. Or like a shifted continent that was,
or axis, and then that even ties in not totally, but a little bit to like Velikovsky's like great Earth catastrophe theories, like how the moon was created, like all that stuff, which looks better and better over the years, which is interesting because he was like criticized as like a kook and like a pseudoscientist, but some of his stuff has been borne out in interesting ways.
Is he the one who says that the moon is like artificially made to keep the Earth balanced?
No, I think it was more like the moon is a result of, or there was some kind of catastrophe about like something that like hit the Earth that created the moon. Like He had
Right.
a bunch of theories. But I don't think he wasn't like an ancient astronaut, like alien dude. He was like just a scientist who went against like geological common sense or whatever.
So do you guys think that Admiral Byrd, what do you think he saw? Like, from what do you gather from what you've read? I mean, I know that it's like, it's all so thin that it's just like, you know, it's hard to make any sort of hypothesis about it, but what do you think? Do you think he just didn't make it to the pole and just fabricated some stuff?
I bet he did, or something happened that was like even weirder. Like there might be like some total diversion that has nothing to do with any of this that happened, which may have been like some kind of alien contact or some kind of weird ancient civilization like he may have seen, like ruins. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if like, if there's necessarily like he saw an entrance to the Hollow Earth, but he was a weird enough dude that I bet there's some really strange hidden aspects of his trips.
Yeah, he seems that way. He seems very shrouded in I mean, like the...
And a 33rd degree Mason's pretty high.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Like,
I think he saw a lot of potential for either his fraternity or for the military-industrial complex.
Damn.
Maybe both.
Yeah. I think that's pretty apt. To me, I think he definitely saw things that he didn't expect.
yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the things that he saw that he didn't expect was probably like massive, massive caverns and entrances to like ice caverns and stuff like that.
Right.
And then, you know, I'm sure there was some crazy anomalous stuff that had happened too, just making flights out there, like...
Totally. Like magnetic stuff.
Yeah, and your energy has probably got to be crazy. Just like you're flying into the unknown, essentially. You know, like...
Right.
I don't know. There's got to be a lot going on there. But I guess we'll never really totally know. I mean, that's what's so interesting about
probably not.
The polar conspiracies is like, we'll never go there. You can't go there. You can't access that. Like, we won't get access to go to McMurdo.
Right.
Like, explore. Even if you wanted to, like, you could die just walking 20 feet out from the base, you know? That's what
I know.
I think makes this stuff really interesting, is people can project mythologies and stories onto this continent.
Totally. Oh, we can't go without mentioning Carpenter's The Thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
As like an example of our polar like obsession in like contemporary cinema. The fact, and I think in the X-Files too, maybe I'm wrong, doesn't like a UFO crash at the pole?
I don't remember that one specifically, but I'm sure they have multiple episodes at the poles. They'd have to, right?
Yeah. So it's, that doesn't prove anything. I mean, unless you think that like John Carpenter is like connected to secret space intelligence, but which like maybe.
Perhaps.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Kubrick probably, but not
You
John
think so?
Carpenter. Yeah, I don't think.
Just because he's too much of a regular Joe.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I'm just John Carpenter. I wrote The Thing.
I did the soundtrack too. You know.
Yeah, that's what he seems like.
Yeah.
I think if you want to hide anything, the best place to hide it is going to be on the moon or at the bottom of the ocean or in Antarctica.
Right.
Or in the Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I hide my stuff.
Yeah. Man, there was something else I wanted to say about this, and it just left my mind. Fuck, I should have...
Well, there's so much, and since we're trying to do like a sort of a mini series on it, we don't have to get everything out. I'm sure stuff will come to us.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And next episode's going to be Nazi heavy, because to me it's so strange that like I mentioned before, that there was this concerted effort to go to Antarctica, and we had a military or a naval response to it, you know. And then people talk about conflict happening there too, which is something we'll get into. And it's so weird to me that there was, you know, a massive war happening in the continent of Europe, but there's these two pretty substantial naval efforts going down there and like doing things. You know, it's really weird, and there you have to try and uncover something there. So we got to look into that a lot further.
Totally.
And I think a big part of that is tracing the funding too, which gets wild. And
that's like might be slightly above our pay grade, but
for sure,
I think it's worth doing a little bit of it at least, because that's, I mean, you're going to get all kinds of crazy military, private military stuff, like even happening today.
Right.
And like SpaceX shit about all this like exploration as like an excuse to plant like either weapons or surveillance is really interesting.
Always. I mean, it's always,
sure.
It always has to do with military advantage, I think, and like
pretty
having
much
a different like logistic advantage. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Even like, it's like even like pre-modern feats of exploration are like never what the history sort of says that they were.
Right.
Like there was always like a tactical reason for it happening. They were never about like, we have to find out what's here. It's always like, you know, we need to go kill some people and take their stuff, or being here will allow us to defend ourselves against, you know, like all this.
Yeah, and depending on who you listen to, Admiral Byrd was in a fucking dogfight against UFOs in Antarctica. You know?
Right. Yeah, chased out of the earth
By
That's
technology.
the one thing that we know for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the only thing we know for sure. A dogfight against the Nazi Bell saucers that were passed down through the Draconians.
Right, but what I thought Byrd was like a crypto Nazi.
I think that's why he survived to not tell the story.
Right, they pretended to chase him. They were like, just pretend.
I think it was just a show of force, much like the 1952 DC flyover.
Oh yeah, you wanted to get that in here.
I just have
You
to...
think those were Nazis? You think they were like the Argentinian Nazis or whatever?
I don't know, Ben. That's our that's just a teaser for episode 2 of The Land Beyond.
What are we calling this one? The Hole in the Pole?
The Hole in the Pole.
Are you doing reverb?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think anybody else can hear it.
I know. You guys can't, but everybody listening can.
Oh no. Now I sound like I don't understand reverb.
Yeah, I think we should cut this one. And
cool.
You know, we're gonna put on our Nazi hats for the next episode.
It'll burn me if I put it on.
God, I know.
Just kidding. I guess Ben Shapiro wears one.
Yeah.
I guess I could probably manage.
Yeah. That's going to be it for us on this one, but we'll be back soon because we're diving deep and we're trying to go down the hole in the North Pole and come out the south, you know, relatively
just
fast.
Surface layer. Yeah.
Yeah. We're barely past the first concentric sphere.
Yeah. I started thinking about today what topics we're going to do after this one. And I'm like, man, I can't wait to queue up some like Atlantean conjuring softball where I don't have to like be fucking damned about like Nazi bases in Antarctica.
Yeah, that's no fun. Yeah. But it's interesting, you know, and if you want to know anything about this stuff, you can't just ignore the Nazis.
No, I mean, it's significant. Like this, what happened here, like to me is really crazy. Operation High Jump, Operation Deep Freeze, and the German expedition Neuschwabenland. There's something going on there, and then it snowballs. It snowballs a whole thing, which, you know, there's still a lot going on there today. There's still a ton of scientific research happening in remote parts of the world that happen to be covered in ice. I mean, I think another thing that we're going to have to talk about is HAARP.
HAARP.
And,
yes,
you know, HAARP could be completely benign. It's probably likely that it's benign, but it's still strange. And I still think we have to get into talking about it. But I didn't know, like a couple of years ago, I guess there was an FBI intercept or something about two dudes, like Alex Jones disciples, wanting to go to HAARP with like AKs and explosives and stuff. Yeah.
But they could just like turn HAARP up, and then those guys will like get turned into like Jello.
HAARP zombies.
Yeah. HAARP is, what is, and I don't remember the acronym, but that's an interesting subject. That'll be good to get into.
Yeah.
It's kind of a classic paranormal forum topic.
Yeah, HAARP's super interesting. Shooting lasers into the ionosphere and raising and lowering them.
Right,
it's
right.
Wild. Right. Wild technology.
Changing the temperature by vibrating. Yeah, the ionosphere is pretty wild.
Weather control implications, like, obviously.
Right. A lot of people often link it to that, you know, that like slightly schizophrenic type thing called Morgellons, where it's like people will find these like fibers in their skin.
Right.
You know what I'm talking? Like that's always tied in with HAARP.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there's Alina. I think it's Alina or Alana. Alina Freeland.
I haven't looked too much into Morgellons because it like
it's
freaks
gross.
me out. Yeah.
I thought I had it once.
That's Jesus Christ.
It was just a hair.
Sorry.
Ingrown hair.
Yeah, just a leg hair. It was just my first leg hair. But yeah. That stuff it's gross, and it's like,
oh my God.
Yeah, I guess we'll talk about because I feel like HAARP gets into the real paranoid end of this stuff, like mind control via like like EMF waves, like that's all kind of in the same wheelhouse, right?
Definitely. It's hilarious because we just did an episode on demonic possession, and this episode has got me way more whacked out because this is like this is like wackadoo shit, you know?
And it's like literally tinfoil hat like territory.
Right, for
like,
sure.
I don't want the waves to get into my head, so I'm going to wear, I guess they want aluminum, but you know, whatever. Maybe
that'll be the tail end of this whole thing, because that is
getting into HAARP and
let me think about the Nazis before I think about HAARP.
There's too much to cover in the next episode about the Nazis.
Yeah, right. All right.
God.
That's going to be it for our last episode before we're all killed by the Fourth Reich.
Right. The secret Fourth Reich. They're like, last time we came together, we had to kill a president. This time, we need to assassinate the co-hosts and guest of a podcast.
Yeah, of a.
I was really nervous about taking the tape off of my cameras today.
Right.
This is the first time my face is being recorded.
That was like a 90-year-old Brazilian ex-Nazi watching you through your laptop.
Yeah.
Jesus.
All right, let's get the hell out of here.
All right.
Next one's going to die anyway.
We'll be back.
Well, thanks for coming on, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I had technical trouble.
No, it was great.
Please join us for the next episode of this very demented saga about the holes in the poles and much more. Listen to us on iTunes, of course, and on YouTube, Stitcher, Podbean, and I think we're on Google and Amazon at this point too. So basically
we are wherever.
Whatever you want, listen to us. We're everywhere. Much like the blank.
The Nazis.
Fill in the blank. Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Yep.